Master Your Emotions. A Practical Guide to Overcome Negativity and Better Manage Your Feelings. By Meurisse. Introduction. The mind in its own place, and in itself, can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. John Milton, poet. We all experience a wild range of emotions throughout our lives. I had to admit, while writing this book, I experienced highs and lows myself. At first, I was filled with excitement and thrilled at the idea of providing people with a guide to help them understand their emotions. I imagined how readers' lives would improve as they learned to control their emotions. My motivation was high and I couldn't help but imagine how great the book would be. Or so I thought. After the initial excitement, the time came to sit down to write the actual book, and that's when the excitement wore off pretty quickly. Ideas that looked great in my mind suddenly felt dull. My writing seemed boring, and I felt as though I had nothing substantive or valuable to contribute. Sitting at my desk and writing became more challenging each day. I started losing confidence. Who was I to write a book about emotions if I couldn't even master my own emotions? How ironic. I considered giving up. There are already plenty of books on the topic, so why add one more? At the same time, I realized this book was a perfect opportunity to work on my own emotional issues. And who doesn't suffer from negative emotions from time to time? We all have highs and lows, don't we? The key is what we do with our lows. Are we using our emotions to grow? Are we learning something from them? Or are we beating ourselves up over them? So, let's talk about your emotions now. Let me start by asking you this. How do you feel right now? Knowing how you feel is the first step toward taking control of your emotions. You may have spent so much time internalizing you've lost touch with your emotions. Perhaps you answered as follows: I feel this book could be useful, or I really feel I could learn something from this book. However, none of these answers reflect how you feel. You don't feel like this, or feel like that, you simply feel. You don't feel like this book could be useful, you think this book could be useful, and that generates an emotion which makes you feel excited about reading it. Feelings manifest as physical sensations in your body, not as an idea in your mind. Perhaps, the reason the word feel is so often overused or misused is because we don't want to talk about our emotions. So, how do you feel now? Why is it important to talk about emotions? How you feel determines the quality of your life. Your emotions can make your life miserable or truly magical. That's why they are among the most important things to focus on. Your emotions color all your experiences. When you feel good, everything seems, feels, or tastes better. You also think better thoughts. Your energy levels are higher and possibilities seem limitless. Conversely, when you feel depressed, everything seems dull. You have little energy and you become unmotivated. You feel stuck in a place, mentally and physically, you don't want to be, and the future looks gloomy. Your emotions can also act as a powerful guide. They can tell you something is wrong and allow you to make changes in your life. As such, they may be among the most powerful personal growth tools you have. Sadly, neither your teachers nor your parents taught you how emotions work or how to control them. I find it ironic that just about anything comes with a how-to manual, while your mind doesn't. You've never received an instruction manual to teach you how your mind works and how to use it to better manage your emotions, have you? I haven't. In fact, until now, I doubt one even existed. What you'll learn in this book. This book is the how-to manual your parents should have given you at birth. It's the instruction manual you should have received at school. In it, I'll share everything you need to know about emotions so you can overcome your fears and limitations and become the type of person you really want to be. You'll learn what emotions are, how they are formed, and how you can use them for your personal growth. You'll also learn how to deal with negative emotions and condition your mind to create more positive emotions. It is my sincere hope and expectation that, by the end of this book, you will have a clear understanding of what emotions are and will have all the tools you need to start taking control of them. More specifically, this book will help you understand what emotions are and how they impact your life, identify negative emotions that control your life and learn to overcome them, change your story to take better control over your life and create a more compelling future, and reprogram your mind to experience more positive emotions. Here is a more detailed summary of what you'll learn in this book. In Part 1, we'll discuss what emotions are. You'll learn why you are wired to focus on negativity and what you can do to counter this effect. You'll also discover how your beliefs impinge upon your emotions. Finally, you'll learn how negative emotions work and why they are so tricky. In Part 2, we'll go over the things that directly impact your emotions. You'll understand the roles your body, your thoughts, your words, or your sleep play in your life and how you can use them to change your emotions. In Part 3, you'll learn how emotions are formed. You'll also learn how to condition your mind to experience more positive emotions. And finally, in Part 4, we'll discuss how to use your emotions as a tool for personal growth. You'll learn why you experience emotions such as fear or depression and how they work. You'll then discover how to use them to grow. Let's get started. How to use this book. I encourage you to read all the way through this book at least once. After that, I invite you to revisit the book and focus on the sections you want to explore in more depth. In this book, I include a number of different exercises. Though I don't expect you to go through them all, my hope is you'll pick some and apply them in your life. Remember, the results you'll get out of this book depend on how much time and effort you're willing to put in. If you feel this book could be of any use to your family members or friends, make sure to share it with them. Emotions are complex and I believe it would benefit us all to deepen our understanding of the topic. Part 1. What emotions are. Have you ever wondered what emotions are and what purpose they serve? In this section, we'll discuss how your survival mechanism affects your emotions. Then, we'll explain what the ego is and how it impacts your emotions. Finally, we'll discover the mechanism behind emotions and learn why negative emotions can be so hard to deal with. 1. How your survival mechanism affects your emotions. Why people have a bias towards negativity. Your brain is designed for survival, which explains why you're able to read this book at this very moment. When you think about it, the probability of you being born was extremely low. For this miracle to happen, all the generations before you had to survive long enough to procreate. In their quest for survival and procreation, they must have faced death hundreds or perhaps thousands of times. Fortunately, unlike your ancestors, you're, probably, not facing death every day. In fact, in many parts of the world, life has never been safer. Yet, your survival mechanism hasn't changed much. Your brain still scans your environment looking for potential threats. In many ways, some parts of your brain have become obsolete. While you may not be seconds away from being eaten by a predator, your brain still gives significantly more weight to negative events than to positive ones. Fear of rejection is one example of a bias toward negativity. In the past, being rejected from your tribe would reduce your chances of survival significantly. Therefore, you learn to look for any sign of rejection, and this became hardwired in your brain. Nowadays, being rejected often carries little or no consequence to your long-term survival. You could be hated by the entire world and still have a job, a roof and plenty of food on the table, yet, your brain is still programmed to perceive rejection as a threat to your survival. This is why rejection can be so painful. While you know most rejections are no big deal, you nevertheless feel the emotional pain. If you listen to your mind, you may even create a whole drama around it. You may believe you aren't worthy of love and dwell on a rejection for days or weeks. Worse still, you may become depressed as a result of this rejection. In fact, one single criticism can often outweigh hundreds of positive ones. That's why, an author with 55-star reviews is likely to feel terrible when they receive a single one-star review. While the author understands the one-star review isn't a threat to her survival, her authorial brain doesn't. It likely interprets the negative review as a threat to her ego, which triggers an emotional reaction. The fear of rejection can also lead you to overdramatize events. If your boss criticized you at work, your brain may see the event as a threat and you now think, what if I'm fired? What if I can't find a job quickly enough and my wife leaves me? What about my kids? What if I can't see them again? While you are fortunate to have such an effective survival mechanism, it is also your responsibility to separate real threats from imaginary ones. If you don't, you'll experience unnecessary pain and worry that will negatively impact the quality of your life. To overcome this bias towards negativity, you must reprogram your mind. One of a human being's greatest powers is our ability to use our thoughts to shape our reality and interpret events in a more empowering way. This book will teach you how to do this. Action Step. Complete the corresponding exercise in the workbook, Section 1. What emotions are? 1. Bias towards negativity. Why your brain's job isn't to make you happy. Your brain's primary job is not to make you happy, but to ensure your survival. Thus, if you want to be happy, you must take control of your emotions rather than hoping you'll be happy because it's your natural state. In the following section, we'll discuss what happiness is and how it works. How dopamine can mess with your happiness. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter which, among other functions, plays a major role in rewarding certain behaviors. When dopamine is released into specific areas of your brain, the pleasure centers, you get a high. This is what happens during exercise, when you gamble, have sex, or eat great food. One of the roles of dopamine is to ensure you look for food so you don't die of starvation, and you search for a mate so you can reproduce. Without dopamine, our species would likely be extinct by now. It's a pretty good thing, right? Well, yes and no. In today's world, this reward system is, in many cases, obsolete. While in the past, dopamine was linked to our survival instinct, the release of dopamine can now be generated artificially. A great example of this effect is social media, which uses psychology to suck as much time as possible out of your life. Have you noticed all these notifications that pop up constantly? They're used to trigger a release of dopamine so you stay connected, and the longer you stay connected, the more money the services make. Watching pornography or gambling also leads to a release of dopamine, which can make these activities highly addictive. Fortunately, we don't need to act each time our brain releases dopamine. For instance, we don't need to constantly check our Facebook news feeds just because it gives us a pleasurable shot of dopamine. Today's society is selling a version of happiness that can make us unhappy. We've become addicted to dopamine largely because of marketers who have found effective ways to exploit our brains. We receive multiple shots of dopamine throughout the day and we love it. But is that the same thing as happiness? Worse than that, dopamine can create real addictions with severe consequences on our health. Research conducted at Tulane University showed that, when given permission to self-stimulate their pleasure center, participants did it an average of 40 times per minute. They chose the stimulation of their pleasure center over food, even refusing to eat when hungry. Korean, Lee Sung-seop is an extreme case of this syndrome. In 2005, Mr. Seop died after playing a video game for 58 hours straight with very little food or water, and no sleep. The subsequent investigation concluded the cause of death was heart failure induced by exhaustion and dehydration. He was only 28 years old. To take control of your emotions, it is essential you understand the role dopamine plays and how it affects your happiness. Are you addicted to your phone? Are you glued to your TV? Or maybe you spend too much time playing video games. Most of us are addicted to something. For some people it's obvious, but for others, it's more subtle. For instance, you could be addicted to thinking. To better control your emotions, it is important to shed the light on your addictions as they can rob you of your happiness. The "one day I will" myth. Do you believe that one day you will achieve your dream and finally be happy? This is unlikely to happen. You may, and I hope you will, achieve your dream, but you won't live happily ever after. This is just another trick your mind plays on you. Your mind quickly acclimates to new situations, which is probably the result of evolution and our need to adapt continually in order to survive and reproduce. This is also probably why the new car or house you want will only make you happy for a while. Once the initial excitement wears off, you'll move on to crave the next exciting thing. This phenomenon is known as hedonic adaptation. How hedonic adaptation works. Let me share an interesting study that will likely change the way you see happiness. This study, which was conducted on lottery winners and paraplegics, was extremely eye-opening for me. Conducted in 1978, the investigation evaluated how winning the lottery or becoming a paraplegic influence happiness. The study found that 1 year after the event, both groups were just as happy as they were beforehand. Yes, just as happy, or unhappy. You can find more about it by watching Dan Gilbert's TED Talk, The Surprising Science of Happiness here. Perhaps you believe that you'll be happy once you've made it. But, as the above study on happiness shows, this is simply not true. No matter what happens to you, you'll revert back to your predetermined level of happiness once you've adapted to the new event. This is how your mind works. Does that mean you can't be happier than you are right now? No. What it means is that, in the long run, external events have very little impact on your level of happiness. In fact, according to Sonia Lyabomirsky, author of The How of Happiness, 50% of our happiness is determined by genetics, 40% by internal factors, and only 10% by external factors. These external factors include such things as whether we're single or married, rich or poor, and similar social influences. This suggests, only 10% of your happiness is linked to external factors, which is probably way less than you thought. The bottom line is this: your attitude towards life influences your happiness, not what happens to you. By now, you understand how your survival mechanism impacts negatively your emotions and prevent you from experiencing more joy and happiness in your life. In the next section, we'll learn about the ego. Action step. Use the workbook to write down things that give you shots of dopamine. Section 1. What emotions are? 2. Happiness. 2. What is the ego? Your survival mechanism is not the only factor affecting your emotions. Your ego also plays a major role in shaping the way you feel. Thus, to gain more control over your emotions, it is fundamental you understand what your ego is and how it works. Now, let's clarify what we mean by ego. We often say of someone he has a big ego, referring to the ego as something close to pride. While pride is certainly a manifestation of ego, that's only one part of it. You may show no pride and appear humble while still being controlled by your ego. So, what is the ego? The ego refers to the self-identity you've constructed throughout your life. How was this identity created? Put simply, the ego was created through your thoughts and, as a mind-created identity, has no concrete reality. Events that happen to you bear no meaning in themselves. You give them meaning only through your interpretation of those events. Additionally, you accept things about yourself because people told you to do so. What's more, you identify with your name, your age, your religion, your political belief, or your occupation in a similar way. This attachment has consequences. As we'll see later in this book, attachment creates beliefs, and these beliefs lead you to experience certain emotions. For instance, you may become offended when people criticize your religion or attack your political principles. Note that throughout this book, we'll refer to the ego as your story or your identity, using these words interchangeably. Are you aware of your ego? Your understanding of the way your ego works depends on your level of self-awareness. People at the lowest level of consciousness are not even aware the ego exists and, as a result, are enslaved by it. On the other hand, highly self-conscious people can see through their ego. They understand how belief works and how excessive attachment to a set of beliefs can create suffering in their life. In effect, these individuals become the master of their mind and are at peace with themselves. Note that the ego is neither good nor bad, it's just a result of a lack of self-awareness. It fades away as you become aware of it, since ego and awareness cannot coexist. Your ego's need for an identity. Your ego is a selfish entity, only concerned about its own survival. Interestingly, it's rather similar to your brain in the way it operates. It has its own survival mechanism and will do whatever it can to persist. As with your brain, its primary concern is neither your happiness nor your peace of mind. On the contrary, your ego is restless. It wants you to be a go-getter. It wants you to do, have and achieve great things so you can become a somebody. As we already mentioned, your ego needs an identity to exist. The way it does that is through identification with things, people, or beliefs and ideas. Now, let's look at some of the things your ego identifies with to strengthen its identity: physical items. The ego likes to identify with physical things. Needless to say, it thrives in today's world. Perhaps, we can say capitalism and the consumer society we're living in today is the creation of collective egos, which is why it has been the dominant economic model in the recent decades. Marketers perfectly understand people's need to identify with things. They know people don't just buy a product, they also buy the emotions or story attached to the product. Often, you buy certain clothes or a particular car because you want to tell a story about yourself. For instance, you may want to enhance your status, look cool or express your unique personality, and choose the products most closely associated with these ideals. This is how the ego works. It uses things to create a story you can identify with. It doesn't mean things are wrong per se. It's a negative issue only when you become overly attached to things, believing they can fulfill you, which they can't. Your body. Most people derive their self-worth from their physical appearance. Your ego loves the way you look because it is the easiest thing to recognize and quantify. When you strongly associate with your physical appearance, you tend to identify more easily with physical and emotional pain. Believe it or not, you can observe your body without identifying with it. Friends/acquaintances. The ego also derives its sense of identity from your relationships with others. The ego is only interested in what it can get from others. In other words, the ego thrives on the way it can use people to strengthen its identity. If you are honest with yourself, you'll realize most of the things you do are attempts to obtain the approval of others. You want your parents to be proud of you, your boss to respect you, and your wife to love you. Now, let's see in more detail how the ego works in the following cases: parent/child relationships. Some parents' egos lead to the creation of a strong sense of attachment and identification with their children. This is based on the false belief their children are their possessions. As a result, they try to control their children's lives and use them to live the life they wanted to live when they were younger. This is called living vicariously through your children. You see this all the time. Next time you watch a junior soccer, or baseball, game, watch the parents on the touchline to see how some react. Try spotting the parents living vicariously. They are the ones screaming the loudest, and not simply in encouragement. This may happen largely unconsciously. Couples. The feeling of needing someone is very much a play of the ego as well. Anthony de Mello has a beautiful way to put it when he says, "Loneliness is not cured by human company. Loneliness is cured by contact with reality, by understanding that we don't need people." Anthony de Mello. Once you realize you don't actually need anyone, you can start enjoying people's company. You can see them as they really are rather than trying to get something from them. Your beliefs. Your ego also uses beliefs to strengthen its identity. In extreme cases, people become so attached to their beliefs they are ready to die to protect them. Worse still, they are willing to kill people who disagree with them. Religion is a perfect illustration of the dangers of excessive attachment to beliefs. The ego will use any belief to strengthen its identity, whether these beliefs are religious, political, or metaphysical. Other objects of identification. Now let's have a look at a non-exhaustive list of things your ego generally derives its identity from: your body, your name, your gender, your nationality, your culture, your family/friends, your beliefs, political beliefs, religious, etc. Your personal story, your interpretation of the past, your expectations regarding the future. Your problems, illnesses, financial situation, victim mindset, etc. Your age. Your job. Your social status. Your role, as employee, homemaker, parental status, employment status, etc. Material items, your house, car, clothes, phone, etc. Your desires. The ego's main characteristics. Here are some main characteristics of the ego. The ego tends to equate having with being, which is why the ego likes to identify with objects. The ego lives through comparison. Your ego likes to compare itself with other egos. The ego is never satisfied. Your ego always wants more. More fame, more stuff, more recognition, and so on. The ego's sense of self-worth often depends on the worth you have in the eyes of others. Your ego needs the approval of other people to feel valued. The ego's need to feel superior. Your ego wants to feel superior to other egos. It wants to stand out and needs to create artificial separations to do that. Here are some stratagems it employs: enhancing its value through people. If you have smart/famous friends, your ego will associate with them to strengthen its identity. This is why some people love to tell others how smart, rich, or famous their friends are. Gossiping. People gossip because it makes them feel different and superior in some way. This is why some people like to put other people down and talk behind their back. It makes them, and everybody else in their gossiping group, feel superior. Manifesting an inferiority complex. This hides a desire to be better than others. Yes, even in this case, people want to feel superior. Manifesting a superiority complex. This hides the fear of not being good enough. Looking for fame. This offers the illusion of superiority, which is why people often dream of becoming famous. Being right. The ego loves to be right. It's a great way for it to affirm its existence. Have you noticed that everybody, from Adolf Hitler to Nelson Mandela, believe they're doing the right thing? Most people think they are correct. But can everybody be right? Complaining. When people complain, by definition they believe they are right and others are wrong. It works with objects as well. Have you ever bumped into a table and complained or even insulted it? I have, and the darn table was wrong to be in my way, wasn't it? Seeking attention. The ego likes to stand out. It loves recognition, praise, or admiration. To seek attention, people may also commit crimes, wear eccentric clothes, or have tattoos all over their body. Your ego's impact on your emotion. Understanding the way your ego works can help you better control your emotions. To do this, you must first realize your current story is the result of a strong identification with people, things, or ideas. This strong identification is the root of many of the negative emotions you experience in your life. For instance, when life doesn't unfold according to your personal story, you get upset, or when someone challenges one of your beliefs, you become defensive. In short, most of your emotions are based on your personal story and the way you perceive the world. As you replace your current story with a more empowering one, while, at the same time, letting go of your excessive attachment to things, people, or ideas, you will be able to experience more positive emotions. Later in this book, we'll see how you can change the way you interpret events. Action step. Take a few minutes to answer the questions in the workbook, Section 1. What emotions are? 3. The nature of the ego. 3. The nature of emotions. Emotions can be tricky. In this section, we'll discuss in depth how they work. By understanding the mechanism behind emotions, you'll be able to manage them more effectively as they arise. The first thing to understand is that emotions come and go. One moment you feel happy, the next you feel sad. While you do have some control over your emotions, you must also recognize their unpredictable nature. If you expect to be happy all the time, you set yourself up for failure. You then risk blaming yourself when you fail to be happy, or even worse, beat yourself up for it. To start taking control of your emotions, you must accept they are transient. You must learn to let them pass without feeling the need to identify strongly with them. You must allow yourself to feel sad without adding commentaries such as, "I shouldn't be sad," or "What's wrong with me?" Instead, you must allow reality to just be. No matter how mentally tough you are, you'll still experience sadness, grief or depression in your life, hopefully not at the same time, and not continually. At times, you'll feel disappointed, betrayed, insecure, resentful or ashamed. You'll doubt yourself and doubt your ability to be the person you want to be. But that's okay because emotions come, but, more importantly, they go. Your negative emotions are not bad or useless. You may blame yourself for experiencing negative emotions or, perhaps, you see yourself as mentally weak. You may even believe something is wrong with you. However, despite what your inner voice may say, your emotions aren't bad. Emotions are simply emotions. Nothing more. As such, being depressed doesn't make you less of a person than you were 3 weeks ago when you were happy. Feeling sad now doesn't mean you'll never be able to laugh again. Remember this: the way you interpret emotions, as well as the blame game you engage in, creates suffering, not the emotions themselves. In fact, negative emotions can actually be helpful. Sometimes, you need to touch rock bottom before you can reach the top. Even the toughest people on earth become depressed. Elon Musk never imagined he would have a mental breakdown, but he did, and he bounced back. After losing his fiancée, Abraham Lincoln was depressed for months. This tragic event didn't prevent him from becoming President of the United States. Negative emotions often serve a purpose. They may serve as a wake-up call. They may help you learn something positive about yourself. Of course, when you're under their spell, it may be difficult to look at the bright side of things, but in hindsight, you may realize emotions, even sad ones, had their role to play in your ultimate success. The positive role of negative emotions. Your emotions are not here to make your life harder, but to tell you something. Without them, you wouldn't grow. Think of your negative emotions as the emotional equivalent of physical pain. While you hate being in pain, if you didn't have pain, chances are you would be dead by now. Physical pain sends a powerful signal that something is wrong, nudging you to take action of some kind. It could be to consult your doctor, which may lead you to undergo surgery, change your diet, or increase exercise. Without physical pain, you wouldn't do any of these things and your situation would worsen, potentially leading to a premature death. Emotions work the same way. They signal you to do something about your current situation. Perhaps, you need to let go of some people, quit your job, or remove a disempowering story that creates suffering in your life. The fleeting nature of emotions. No matter how depressed you are, how much grief you're experiencing, or how horrible you feel at a given point in time, this shall pass. Look at some of the negative emotions you experienced in the past. Remember the worst times in your life. During these most difficult periods, you were probably so caught up in your emotions you imagined never being able to escape them. You couldn't imagine being happy again. But even these episodes ended. Eventually, the clouds dissipated and the real you shone again. Your emotions come and they go. Your depression will go, your sadness will vanish and your anger will fade away. Bear in mind, if you experience the same emotions repeatedly, it probably means you hold disempowering beliefs and need to change something in your life. We'll discuss how later. If you suffer from severe, chronic depression, it might be a good idea to consult a specialist. The trickiness of emotions. Have you ever felt you'll never be happy again? Have you ever been so attached to your emotions you thought they'll never go away? Don't worry, it's a common feeling. Negative emotions act as a filter that taints the quality of your experiences. During a negative episode, every experience is perceived through this filter. While the world outside may remain the same, you will experience it in a completely different way based on how you feel. For instance, when you're depressed, you don't enjoy the food you eat, the movie you see, or the activities in which you engage. You only see the negative side of things, feeling trapped and powerless. On the other hand, when you're in a positive mood, everything in life appears better. Food tastes great, you're naturally friendlier, and you enjoy all the activities you partake in. You may now believe that, armed with the knowledge you have gained from this book, you'll never be depressed again. Wrong. You'll keep experiencing sadness, frustration, depression, or resentment, but hopefully, each time these occur, you'll become wiser and wiser, remembering that this too shall pass. I have to admit, I can easily be fooled by my emotions. While I know I am not my emotions, I still give them too much credit and fail to realize they are just temporary visitors. More importantly, I fail to remember they are not me. Emotions always come and go, but I remain. Once the emotional storm has passed, I generally feel like an idiot for having taken my emotions so seriously. Do you? Interestingly, external factors might not be, and often aren't, the direct cause of a sudden change in your emotional state. You can be in the exact same situation, with the same job, the same amount of money in your bank account, and have the same problems as always, but experience radically different emotional states. In fact, if you look at your past, this is often what happens. You are mildly depressed for a couple of hours or a few days, before bouncing back to your default emotional state. During this period of emotional stress, your environment doesn't change at all. The only thing that changes is your internal dialogue. I encourage you to make a conscious effort to notice whenever such events happen and start seeing through your emotions' trickery. You might want to go one step further and record these events in a journal. By doing so, you will gain a deeper understanding of how emotions work and, as a result, you will be better equipped to manage them. The evil power of emotions. An emotion usually represents an amplified energized thought pattern, and because of its often overpowering energetic charges, it is not easy initially to stay present enough to be able to watch it. It wants to take you over, and it usually succeeds, unless there is enough presence in you. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Negative emotions are like a spell. While you're under their influence, breaking free from them seems impossible. You may know dwelling on the same thoughts is pointless, yet you can't help but go along with the flow. Feeling an intense pull, you keep identifying with your thoughts and, as a result, feel worse and worse. When this happens, no rational argument seems to work. The more these emotions fit your personal story, the stronger the pull becomes. For instance, if you believe you aren't good enough, you may experience negative emotions such as guilt or shame each time you judge what you do is not good enough. Because you've experienced these emotions so many times before, they have become an automatic response. For more information on how the identification with emotions works, refers to the section Identification. The filtering power of emotions. Your emotional state can drastically affect your outlook on life, leading you to act and behave differently. When you're in a positive state, you have more energy available. This gives you more confidence in everything you do. An openness to consider new actions that could improve your life. The ability to leave or break out of your comfort zone, more emotional room to persevere during tough times, better ideas and enhanced creativity, and easy access to positive emotions within the same emotional range. When you're in a negative state of mind, you have less energy available, giving you a lack of confidence that affects everything you do, a lack of motivation that reduces the scope of actions you're willing to take. A reluctance to take on new challenges and leave your comfort zone. A reduced ability to persevere in face of setbacks, and a propensity to attract negative thoughts within the same emotional range. Let's have a look at a real example. Real life example. Let me share with you a real example from my own life. Both cases happened under the same external conditions. The only difference was my emotional state at the time. Case 1, feeling excited about my online business, more confidence in everything I do, I feel as though my ideas are good. I'm excited to work on my books and eager to write articles. I am open to sharing my work and promoting it. An openness to consider new courses of action, I am open to new ideas or to work on a new project. I can think of ways to collaborate with other authors and start building a new coaching program to offer my audience. The ability to get out of my comfort zone, it becomes easier for me to push myself beyond my comfort zone. I may contact people I don't know, or run Facebook Lives for instance. More emotional room to persevere, I stick to my projects even when I lack motivation. Better ideas and enhanced creativity, I am open to new ideas. I might come up with new ideas for books, articles or other creative projects. Easy access to more positive emotions, I attract more positive emotions. At the same time, my mind rejects negative thoughts more easily, by refusing to identify with them. Case 2, feeling mildly depressed due to my lack of results, a lack of confidence, I start doubting myself and all the projects I'm currently working on. Suddenly, everything I do becomes useless or not good enough. Thoughts like, what's the point, I'm not going to make it, or I'm stupid, cross my mind. Needless to say, promoting myself becomes a major challenge. A lack of motivation, I don't feel like doing anything. I'm attacked by, and am unable to escape, negative thoughts. I have the same negative thoughts again and again, which repeat like a broken record. They seem so real and taint all my experiences. A difficulty to take on new challenges, I have little energy left over to leave my comfort and undertake challenging projects. A reduced ability to persevere, I have difficulty finishing tasks and I procrastinate over tasks I should be working on. A propensity to attract negative thoughts, I attract more and more negative thoughts. Although these thoughts may have been crossing my mind before, now they stick fast. By identifying with these thoughts, I generate more negative emotions. Both cases happened only a few days apart. The external environment was the exact same, but my emotional state was radically different and led me to take different actions. The magnetic power of emotions. Your emotions act like magnets. They attract thoughts on the same wave. That's why, when you're in a negative state, you easily attract other negative thoughts, and by latching onto these thoughts you make the situation worse. As Eckhart Tolle wrote in The Power of Now, often, a vicious circle builds up between your thinking and the emotion, they feed each other. The thought pattern creates a magnified reflection of itself in the form of an emotion, and the vibrational frequency of the emotion keeps feeding the original thought pattern. Eckhart Tolle. Now, let's see what you can do to break free from that magnetic power. Breaking the magnetic power of emotions. Let's say you have a bad day at work and you're in a terrible mood. The negative state you're in causes you to attract more negative thoughts. Suddenly, you fixate on the fact you're still single at 30 and start beating yourself up over it. Then, you blame yourself for being overweight. You also remember you have to go to the office the following Saturday, which reminds you how much your job sucks. Do you see how much easier it is to attract negative thoughts when you're feeling low? To prevent this from happening, it is essential you remove the habit of clustering negative thoughts together. Real life example, I have knee problems, which prevents me from practicing many sports. Since I've always loved sports, these injuries have been a source of emotional pain. Fortunately, I seldom feel pain in my knees, but when I do, it can trigger negative emotions. One day, as I was observing my thought process, we all have different hobbies, haven't we? I realized experiencing pain in my knees negatively affected my mood, triggering more negative emotions in a negative feedback loop. The pain would cause me to focus on all the things that were going wrong, from my work to my personal life. As a result, I would experience negative emotions for hours, or even days. The point I'm making is, no matter how great your life is, if you spend most of your time focusing on your problems, you'll become depressed. Thus, to reduce negative emotions, you must learn to compartmentalize your issues. Don't let your mind overdramatize things by clustering unrelated issues. It will only make you feel worse. Instead, remember that negative emotions exist only in your mind. Taken separately, most of your issues aren't such a big deal, and there is no rule that says you have to solve them all at once. Start noticing how you feel. Record your negative emotions. Look at what triggers them. The more you do this, the more you will uncover certain patterns. For example, let's say you felt sad for a couple of days. Ask yourself the following questions. What triggered my emotions? What fueled them over the 2-day period? What story was I telling myself? How and why did I get out of my slump? What can I learn from this episode? Answering these questions will be invaluable and will greatly help you deal with similar issues in the future. Your emotional accessibility. We previously saw you attract thoughts that matched your emotional state. The opposite is also true. You can't attract thoughts that are out of sync with how you feel at any given time. Even if you tried to think positive thoughts, your mind wouldn't be receptive to them. This is why during periods of sadness, while positive thoughts may cross your mind from time to time, you won't be able to associate with them and you won't be able to change your emotional state. Your emotional set point. Have you ever been told to cheer up when you were grieving, or express gratitude when you were depressed? Did it help? It probably didn't. This is because the emotional state you were in didn't allow you access to these emotions. In their book, Ask and It Is Given, Esther and Jerry Hicks offer a model to explain how emotional ranges are connected and how we can move up the ladder from negative to more positive emotions. For instance, in this model, depression or hopelessness is at the bottom of the ladder, followed by anger. What it means is that when you feel depressed, signs of anger indicate you're climbing the emotional ladder. This makes sense. When you're angry, you have more energy than when you're depressed, right? Recently, after being depressed for a while, I experienced feelings of anger. For some reason, I got tired of the stories and excuses running through my mind, and I used the anger as a fuel to complete the tasks I had been avoiding. As a result, I was able to create momentum and climb the emotional ladder. Whenever you experience negative emotions, watch for emotions that give you more energy. So-called negative emotions like anger can help you overcome even more disempowering emotions, like hopelessness. Only you know how you feel. Therefore, if anger feels better, accept it. Emotions and mental suffering. Did you know you create a lot of unnecessary pain in your life? Each time you lock on to a thought, or hold on to an emotion, you suffer. A great example of this is how you react to physical pain. Whenever you feel pain, your first reaction is to interpret it. When you do so, you generate negative thoughts. Your identification with these thoughts is what creates mental suffering. Below are some of the thoughts that may cross your mind in these situations. What if this pain never goes away? What if I can't do X, Y, Z anymore because of the pain? What if it gets worse? What if I need to undergo surgery? What if I can't go to work? I have an important project I must finish on time. With this pain, today's going to be challenging. I don't have money. How will I pay hospital bills if things get worse? This internal dialogue creates suffering but does nothing to help solve the problem. You can still function properly and take appropriate actions without dwelling on any of the above worries. Negative emotions are not the problem, the mental suffering you create out of these emotions is. Another example of mental suffering is procrastination. Have you ever delayed starting a task for days or weeks just to realize it wasn't a big deal once you'd completed it? I have. What was the most exhausting part, the task itself, or the time you spent worrying about it? Or perhaps you didn't sleep long enough and keep telling yourself today is going to be a rough day. As you imagine all the tasks you need to do, you already feel exhausted. Psychologists have shown that mental suffering is what consumes most of your energy. After all, sitting at a desk all day shouldn't be that tiring, yet many of us feel exhausted at the end of the day. In his classic book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, Dale Carnegie wrote the following: one of America's most distinguished psychiatrists, Dr. A. Brill, goes even further. He declares, 100% of the fatigue of the sedentary worker in good health is due to psychological factors, by which we mean emotional factors. Dale Carnegie. People inflict a tremendous amount of suffering on themselves. As you continue reading this book, you'll realize the idiocy of this activity. You'll notice people around you dwelling on a past they cannot alter. You'll see your family members and friends worrying about a future they cannot predict. You'll witness people having the same repeated thoughts, running in circles to fight a problem that exists only in their mind. For thousands of years, mystics have told us that problems are in our mind. They have repeatedly invited us to look within. Yet, today, how many people are listening? Too many of us are addicted to our problems. Instead of letting go, we complain, we play the victim, we blame other people, or we discuss our problems without doing anything to solve them. To reduce this mental suffering, we must refuse to interpret our emotions in a negative and disempowering way. Why problems don't exist? If we go one step further and look at reality in an objective way, we can say that problems don't actually exist. Here is why: what you don't focus on doesn't exist, a problem only exists when you give it your attention. From your mind's perspective, what you don't give any thought to doesn't exist. Let's take a hypothetical example. Imagine you lost your legs. If you accept that fact immediately and refuse to give it any thought, there will be no problem and thus, no mental suffering. You would simply be living in reality. Of course, that's usually not what happens. A problem exists only in time, a problem can only exist in the past or in the future. And where do the past and future exist? In your mind. To acknowledge a problem, you must use your thoughts, and thoughts exist in time, not in the present moment. A problem needs to be labeled as a problem to actually exist. A problem exists only when you interpret a situation as being a problem. Otherwise, there is no problem. This concept may be hard to grasp at first, but it's a key theory. In the next section, we'll look at the different components affecting your emotions. Action step. Explore the nature of emotions using the workbook, Section 1. What emotions are. 4. The nature of emotions. Part 2. What impacts your emotions? Your mind operates on the famous computing principle of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you do ill, speak ill, and think ill, the residue is going to leave you sick. If you do well, speak well, and think well, the outcome is going to be well. OSAMT. Emotions are complex, and a variety of factors influence how you feel. In this section, we'll cover some of the elements affecting what drives your emotions. The good news is, you have some control over them. If we exclude spontaneous emotional reactions resulting from your survival mechanism, most of your emotions are self-created. They result from the way you interpret thoughts or events. However, these aren't the only elements that affect your emotional state. Your body, your voice, the food you eat, or how much you sleep, also play a role in determining the quality of your emotions and therefore the quality of your life. Let's see how each of these elements impact your emotions. 4. The impact of sleep on your mood. The quality of your sleep and how much of it you get affects your emotional state. You've probably experienced the side effects of sleep deprivation yourself. Perhaps, you felt grumpy, unable to concentrate, listless, or had difficulty dealing with negative emotions. Sleep deprivation can impact mood in many different ways. According to a survey performed on people suffering from anxiety or depression, most of the respondents reported receiving less than 6 hours sleep per night. Sleep deprivation also increases mortality risk. A 2016 study conducted by researchers at non-profit organization, RAND Europe, estimated that people sleeping less than 6 hours a night had a 13% increased mortality risk than people sleeping between 7 and 9 hours. The same studies revealed that lack of sleep cost an estimated $411 billion per year to the United States economy. Interestingly, sleep deprivation also seems to reduce an individual's ability to enjoy positive experiences. One study shows that, while people who had enough sleep did experience a positive effect from such experiences, no such effect was generated in people who were sleep deprived. How to improve the quality of your sleep? There are many ways to improve the quality of your sleep. Let's go over some of them. Make sure your bedroom is pitch black. Many studies have shown that the darker the bedroom is, the better we tend to sleep. If your room isn't pitch black, what can you do to make it darker? Maybe you can buy a sleep mask, or curtains that do a better job at blocking daylight. Avoid using electronic devices. This applies to smartphones, tablets, televisions, and the like. According to sleepfoundation.org, studies have shown that even our small electronic devices emit sufficient light to miscue the brain and promote wakefulness. As adults, we are subject to these influences, and our children are particularly susceptible. A 2014 study published in PNAS showed that melatonin, a chemical which helps regulate sleep patterns, was reduced by 50% in participants who read with electronic devices rather than books. These participants took about 10 minutes longer to fall asleep and lost 10 minutes of deep sleep, also known as REM. Participants also reported feeling less alert in the morning. If your device has a light setting for nighttime use, it may still have a negative impact on your sleep, but just test the night setting and see if it makes a difference to your sleep patterns. If you absolutely have to use electronic devices at night, considering wearing glasses that block the blue light they emit. It's best to put the glasses on a few hours before you go to bed. Relax your mind. If you're like me, you may have all kinds of thoughts running through your head when it's time to fall asleep. I tend to get very excited about new ideas I have, or things I want to do. As a result, I often feel as though there are so many things I could have completed during the day, and these feelings make it difficult for me to sleep. Aside from turning off electronic devices before bed, I've found that listening to soothing music really helps. Reading a physical book can also help me relax, as long as I don't get too excited by the book, which has been known to happen. Avoid drinking too much water within 2 hours of going to bed. This one is obvious, but still worth mentioning. If you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, it's going to interrupt your sleep pattern. This, of course, will probably make you more tired the next day. Have an evening ritual. This alone will help you fall asleep more easily. It's best to try going to bed at the same time every night, including the weekends. If you like to go out during the weekend and stay up late, this will present a challenge, but I encourage you to give it a try and see how it goes. An evening ritual will also help you stay on track with your morning ritual. It will be easier to wake up every day at the same time without feeling tired if you have a morning and a nighttime ritual. If you do go out and stay up late during the weekend, one thing you can do is still wake up as early as during the weekdays and have a couple of naps throughout the day as necessary. If you have difficulty sleeping well, try to implement some of the things mentioned above. The best advice I can give you is to keep trying different strategies until you figure out what works best for you. 5. Using your body to influence your emotions. Our bodies change our minds change our behavior, and our behavior changes our outcomes. Amy Cuddy. Social psychologist. Body language and body posture. By changing your body language and your body posture, you can alter the way you feel. When you are confident or happy, you expand your body and make yourself bigger. Have you noticed how men straighten their backs, expand their chests, and tighten their stomachs when they see an attractive woman? That's an unconscious behavior designed to show confidence and power, the same way gorillas pound their chests. In one of her experiments, Amy Cuddy, a social psychologist at Harvard Business School, showed that participants who adopted a high-power pose for just 2 minutes displayed characteristics similar to those of confident and powerful people. More specifically, she noticed the following hormonal changes. After adopting a high-power pose for 2 minutes, testosterone increased by 25%.